The knock came earlier than Claire expected, sharp and sudden, like it carried news instead of a request, and she paused mid-step in her quiet Portland townhouse, heart-jumping for reasons she couldn't name. Because nothing unusual was supposed to happen that afternoon, not on a gray weekday where rain slid down the windows and the street outside stayed empty and calm. And yet the moment she opened the door and saw Ethan Harris standing there with his backpack slung low and his hair still damp from the drizzle, something shifted inside her, quick and unsettling, even though she told herself it was just another study session, just another favor for a neighbor she had known for years in passing but never really known at all. And Ethan smiled in that polite, careful way of someone who didn't want to take up too much space, thanking her again for helping him prepare for his law exams, his voice steady but tired, and Claire stepped aside to let him in, noticing how the house felt smaller. Once he crossed the threshold, like the air itself had changed, and as they walked toward the dining table she reminded herself why she agreed to this in the first place, because she used to teach, because she liked helping people find confidence. Because his mother had sounded worried, and none of those reasons had anything to do with the quiet warmth she felt when Ethan laughed softly at a joke she barely meant to make, or the way he listened closely when she explained a concept, nodding like every word mattered, and they moved fast through the material, pages flipping, pens tapping, the rain growing heavier outside as if time was speeding up along with them, and Claire noticed how focused Ethan became when he understood something new, how his shoulders relaxed, how relief crossed his face, and she felt a strange pride that surprised her, not the distant pride of a teacher but something closer, more personal, and she pushed that thought away quickly, keeping her tone light, her words simple, making sure not to linger too long on anything that felt too warm or too close, because this was supposed to be easy, safe, temporary, but the house kept offering small moments she didn't expect, like when the power flickered briefly and the room dimmed and Ethan joked about bad timing, or when she poured them both coffee and realized she remembered how he liked it without asking, or when he mentioned feeling behind in life and his voice dropped just a little, and she saw not the grown man studying law but someone still carrying doubt like a heavy coat, and Claire responded without thinking, telling him that life didn't move on one track, that pauses didn't mean failure, that some people took longer because they cared more, and as soon as she said it she felt exposed, like she had spoken about herself too clearly, and Ethan looked at her then, really looked, as if he had just noticed something important, and the moment stretched, not long enough to be obvious but long enough to matter, long enough to feel dangerous, and Claire cleared her throat and suggested they keep going, flipping the page quickly, and they did, faster now, the pace picking up, questions answered, notes made, both of them pretending the air wasn't thick with something unnamed, and when the clock chimed from the wall Claire realized how much time had passed, how late it was getting, how easy it had been to forget everything else, and she suggested a short break, just a few minutes, saying it casually even though her chest felt tight, and they stood in the kitchen instead of sitting, space somehow easier that way, the sound of rain filling the silence between their words, and Ethan talked about his exam schedule, about pressure, about expectations, and Claire listened, nodding, offering quick encouragement, keeping things moving, but inside she felt the weight of awareness growing, because she noticed how close they were standing, how his voice softened when he spoke to her, how her name sounded different in his mouth, and she realized that this wasn't just about studying anymore, even if nothing improper had happened, even if nothing ever would, because something quieter and harder to control had already started, a connection built not from touch or intention but from shared focus, shared honesty, shared time, and Claire felt the need to step back, emotionally if not physically, reminding herself of boundaries, of age, of context, of the simple fact that some feelings arrived uninvited and had to be acknowledged without being followed, and when the break ended she led the way back to the table, moving quickly, keeping the pace high, guiding Ethan through one last set of questions, and he followed, grateful, determined, unaware or maybe aware and choosing not to say anything yet. And as the session wrapped up and he packed his bag, thanking her again with a sincerity that lingered, Claire walked him to the door, rain still falling, the light outside fading, and for a brief second neither of them moved, as if waiting for something unscheduled to happen, and Claire felt the pull of that moment, felt the risk of staying in it too long, so she smiled, wished him luck, and closed the door gently after he left, leaning against it for a heartbeat longer than necessary, knowing that nothing dramatic had occurred, nothing visible or loud, and yet everything had quietly changed, because sometimes the beginning of a story didn't announce itself at all, it simply settled in, patient and unresolved, waiting for the next knock. The second session began with less hesitation and more movement, like both Claire and Ethan were trying to outrun whatever had been left unsaid the last time, and the moment Ethan stepped inside the house again, shaking rain from his jacket and smiling with a confidence that felt newly borrowed, the pace picked up without effort, books opening, chairs scraping back, questions flying faster than before, Claire guiding him through complex ideas with short, sharp explanations while Ethan answered with growing clarity, his words smoother, his thinking quicker, and the room filled with the rhythm of progress, pages turning, pens moving, time slipping past without resistance, and Claire noticed how easily they worked together now, like they had found a shared beat. No pauses wasted, no space left empty, and yet beneath that speed there was awareness, quiet but present, in the way Ethan leaned forward when she spoke, in the way Claire held his gaze a second longer than needed before looking back at the notes, and when he got an answer right without help, his smile broke wide and unguarded. Claire felt a rush of pride that made her heart stumble, not enough to stop her but enough to remind her she was walking close to something she didn't fully understand. And when she praised him it came out warm but brief, careful not to linger, keeping the pace tight, pushing them forward. But Ethan slowed it without trying, asking questions that went just beyond the page, wondering aloud why certain rules existed, how people behind those laws felt, and Claire answered honestly, drawing from experience, letting her voice soften without meaning to, and suddenly the study session turned into a conversation about choice, pressure, and the fear of making the wrong turn in life, and Ethan admitted he was scared not of failing the exam but of succeeding and still feeling empty, his words quick, almost rushed, like he needed to say them before he lost the nerve, and Claire responded just as fast, telling him that fear didn't mean weakness, that doubt often followed people who cared deeply, and that meaning was built slowly, not awarded all at once, and the room felt smaller as the truth of those words settled between them. And when the clock chimed again Claire suggested a break before either of them could think too hard, moving toward the kitchen, pouring coffee without asking, handing Ethan a mug, their fingers almost touching and pulling back at the same time, the moment light but charged, and they stood instead of sitting, both choosing motion over stillness, the rain now lighter outside, tapping like a quiet reminder of time passing, and Ethan talked about his parents' expectations, about how success in his family came with rules and timelines, and Claire shared just enough of her own story to meet him halfway, mentioning the job she left, the plans she adjusted, the sense of starting over that never fully faded, and neither of them framed it as regret, but both understood the weight behind the words, and there was laughter too, quick and natural, cutting through the seriousness, easing the tension without removing it, and when they returned to the table the studying felt different, sharper but closer, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they leaned in, their voices lower, the pace still fast but the space between them thinner, and Claire noticed how Ethan no longer asked for reassurance, only confirmation, how his confidence had shifted from borrowed to earned, and that realization made her step back internally even as she stayed engaged, because helping him grow meant eventually letting him move forward without her, and that thought carried an ache she hadn't expected. And when the session ended Ethan packed up slowly, not dragging time but not rushing it either, and he stood near the door again, posture relaxed but eyes serious, and he spoke with care, telling her the break had helped more than he expected, that talking to her felt easy in a way he hadn't felt in a long time, and Claire felt the truth of that statement settle deep, steady and unsettling, and she answered honestly but briefly, acknowledging the connection without defining it, because naming things had consequences. And when he left this time the silence didn't rush in, it lingered, thoughtful and full, and Claire stood alone again, aware that the pace they had kept was no accident, that speed could carry people far but not away from themselves, and she knew, even without saying it out loud, that something had been set in motion during that simple break. Something that would not slow down just because they wanted it to. The third session did not start calmly, it started already moving. Like both Claire and Ethan had arrived carrying thoughts they could not set down, and from the moment Ethan stepped inside, there was a quiet urgency in the way he spoke and listened, no wasted words, no casual jokes, just focus layered with tension, and Claire felt it too as she led him straight to the table, opening the book without small talk, pushing forward. As if speed could keep things under control, and the studying became intense, questions answered quickly, explanations short and sharp, both of them working faster than before, but the faster they moved the more obvious the strain became. Because Ethan's answers were correct yet rushed, and Claire's guidance was precise but tight, her voice steady while her thoughts ran ahead, and every few minutes there was a pause neither of them planned, a breath held too long, a glance that landed and stayed, and each time Claire pulled back first, flipping a page, tapping a pen, reminding them both why they were there, but Ethan began to notice, his eyes tracking her movements, his focus shifting away from the notes, and when he finally stopped mid-sentence and asked if she was all right, the question landed heavier than it should have, and Claire answered quickly, saying she was fine, that they should keep going, and they did, but the rhythm was broken, replaced by something uneven and fragile, and when Ethan made a mistake he normally wouldn't have, frustration crossed his face, and Claire corrected him gently, slower now, and that slowness cracked something open, because Ethan spoke then, not about the exam but about the space between them, saying he felt like something had changed, that he didn't want to make things uncomfortable but couldn't ignore the shift, his words fast but careful, like he was stepping across thin ice, and Claire listened without interrupting, heart pounding, knowing this moment could not be avoided any longer, and when she spoke she chose honesty. Without invitation, telling him that she cared, that she valued their time, but that lines mattered, that timing mattered, and that sometimes feelings appeared without permission, and what mattered most was what people did next, and Ethan absorbed every word, nodding slowly, his expression serious but not hurt, and he responded just as carefully, saying he didn't expect anything, that he only wanted her to know he respected her, that he trusted her, and that trust hung in the air like something fragile and rare, and for a moment neither of them moved, the world outside quiet, the rain gone, the house still, and Claire felt the weight of choice pressing in, not a dramatic choice but a quiet one, the kind that shaped futures slowly, and she chose to step back without stepping away, suggesting they finish one last section and end early, keeping her voice calm and forward-moving, and Ethan agreed, matching her pace, and the final stretch of studying felt clean and focused, the tension settling into something calmer, almost sad, but steady, and when they reached the end Ethan smiled, a small genuine smile, thanking her again, not just for the help but for the honesty, and that gratitude stayed with Claire as she walked him to the door, aware that this goodbye felt heavier than the others, not final but meaningful, and Ethan paused, looking at her with clear eyes, telling her that whatever happened next, he would carry this time with him as something good, something grounding. And Claire felt her chest tighten but she smiled back, wishing him luck, meaning it in more ways than one, and after the door closed she did not lean against it this time, she stood straight, breathing evenly, knowing that something important had passed without crossing into harm, that restraint could be as emotional as action, and that letting someone grow sometimes meant accepting distance, and as she returned to the quiet table, the scattered papers now orderly, she understood that the hardest part was not feeling something unexpected, but choosing to hold it with care, and that choice, though quiet, would stay with her long after the exams were over. The days after the last session moved faster than Claire expected, not because much happened, but because everything inside her stayed alert, listening, and the house next door felt louder in its quiet, and she filled her time with work, deadlines, errands, anything that kept her from standing too long at the window or checking her phone without reason, and when Ethan didn't come by again she told herself that was good, that space meant clarity, that endings didn't always need speeches, but clarity did not bring calm the way she hoped, because every ordinary moment carried an echo of shared focus and half-finished thoughts, and she wondered how easily something small could settle so deep, and then one morning the rain stopped, sunlight cutting across the street like a reset, and Claire woke with a steadier breath, deciding she would let the feeling exist without feeding it, because life kept moving whether people were ready or not, and later that afternoon she saw Ethan outside loading books into his car, moving quickly, purposeful, and she hesitated only a second before stepping out, greeting him casually, keeping her tone light, and Ethan smiled back, relaxed, confident in a way that told her the exams were close but no longer crushing him, and they spoke briefly, about schedules, about weather, about nothing important, and that nothing felt like progress, because it proved they could stand in the same space without tension pulling too hard, and when Ethan mentioned he had passed a major practice test, pride rose in Claire again, warm and clean this time, and she congratulated him honestly, meaning it fully, and he thanked her, not with weight or expectation, just gratitude, and when they parted she felt lighter than she had in weeks, because whatever this connection was, it had not demanded more than they could give, and that evening her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan, simple and respectful, telling her the exam was scheduled, telling her he felt ready, and Claire replied just as simply, wishing him luck, reminding him he had earned his confidence, and when the exam day came she didn't wait by the phone or mark the hours, she trusted the quiet, and when the message finally arrived saying he had done well, relief washed over her like closure and beginning at the same time, and she smiled alone in her kitchen, understanding that some relationships were not meant to grow forward but inward, shaping people quietly before releasing them, and days later she ran into Ethan again, this time with his parents, his posture proud, his future opening in front of him, and he introduced Claire with respect, with warmth, but without the charged pause that once lived between them, and that told her everything she needed to know, because the connection had done its work and softened into something safe, something lasting but not heavy, and as weeks passed and life returned fully to its routines, Claire noticed how the memory no longer hurt, how it rested instead like a reminder that she was still capable of feeling deeply without losing herself, and sometimes, late at night, she thought about how a quick break had changed the shape of a season, not through action or promises, but through honesty, restraint, and care, and she realized that romance was not always about what people reached for, but about what they protected, and in that understanding she found peace, knowing that what had passed between them was real, meaningful, and complete, exactly as it was.